Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to tell you this is a fantastic report. This is something I think that a lot of county executives and local officials have been looking at for years and saying we need some relief here. Especially, I remember working for a former Orange County executive and speaking to him when putting the budget together about the cost of Medicaid on the budget. It's just absolutely incredible. So thank you for putting this report together. Very, very important. And I hope that we can put some legislation together this year that is going to correct some of these problems here. I had a couple of questions. We did implement that 2% cap, the property tax levy cap. And as a member of the Orange County Association of Towns, I've been hearing from town supervisors all across Orange County, even in Rockland County. They're having a hard time putting their budgets together because of the 2% cap, because 2% is not really 2%. And we have that section there about the rate of inflation. Could you talk to us a little bit about that and your recommendations? Should we take that out? I know there's a bill there that we have floating around that 2% is 2%. And there's also various other bills that have been spoken about with the Association of Towns about exemptions in the cap. Mm-hmm. So could you maybe give us some recommendations on that and what we could do?
Well, sure. You are setting the limits at the state level. I can't sit here and say, please give us more authority to tax our people. I don't want to say that. I think that we're overtaxed in New York State and that we need to do everything we can to reduce property taxes. We can no longer exempt it from our federal income tax. It's a highly offensive and hostile action by the federal government to take away that provision that's been on the books for hundreds of years. So what are we left with? We're left with $5 billion of county property tax, and we're left with $35 billion of school property tax. I mean, that's a lot of tax that we have. So I can't ask you to undo the property tax cap because I appreciate the focus that you put on it in the first instance. So by capping the property tax, you said to the people of New York, our taxes are too high. We want to limit that. So that's a good thing. But the tools were not given to help with the underlying root cause of it. So my answer would be to continue to, from our level of government, figure out why are we funding preschool special education at the county level when it's really an education policy set by school districts and the state of New York. It makes no sense. So if you could just pull apart one or two of these other mandates and try to address that to help us reduce the property tax, that would be appreciated. That's a hard thing to do. I get it. You got to go through the other house and the governor and the executive policy. So short of that, it doesn't make sense when you have natural disasters and massive unusual expenditures confronting a local government that would have to pay for that to be part of a property tax cap calculation. It doesn't make sense. It's punishing their residents and communities. Also, the capital expenditures. Government, at your direction, really, the localities have been deferring capital expenditures. Why? Because they don't want to breach the property tax cap. And you're just deferring and making projects more expensive in the outer years. I don't know if that's in the best interest of the taxpayers, but that's what's happening because they don't want to be known as people breaching the state's property tax cap. It reflects poorly on us at our boards all across the state. So I do think that you should consider looking into the property tax cap itself and what's exempted, what's included, why, and perhaps make some suggested exemptions there. So I think that would be worthy.
And I certainly agree that putting the 2% cap into place was a necessary evil that we had to do because it keeps all the local governments under control as well. So thank you on that. Also, A big issue in Orange and Sullivan County also, probably some other portions of the state, are a lot of these property tax exemptions. Sometimes whole properties are exempted from the tax rolls for various maybe religious reasons or whatever the case may be. And I know, again, there are bills out there that reform that whole system. Do you have any suggestions toward that as well that we could possibly implement?
Oh, I think that's worthy of another public hearing, very much so, especially and in light of the federal actions on the deducting the property tax that's tied to charities. It's a big issue and it's a big problem worthy of taking testimony more specifically on that exact issue. I'm not prepared today to give you examples of that, but I would be if at another forum where I could properly come before you and talk about that. That is a big problem. It's a big problem right here in the city of Albany, as we all know, but it's a big problem in other areas of the state with parklands and other not-for-profits, and how the proliferation of those exempt entities affects the local governments is very serious. And again, probably an area of statutory laws that are needed of reform have not been addressed in years. So I'm sorry I can't be more specific.
Okay, definitely, and that would be a great hearing to have at a future date. And also, you have here the list of counties and cost savings that have been generated throughout the state. I was on page 4 and 5 of the report here. I was just wondering, do you have any maybe specific examples that you could give to us on some of the cost savings that governments have generated, just to give, if anybody else is watching, to give them an idea, because I know, networking is the best bet, and you get that ideas by talking to other people. So if you have any specific examples, really good projects that counties have put together, or even municipalities to achieve cost savings, that'd be appreciated.
Certainly. We found, although it's not, again, some of the areas that were included in the reports, back to Chairman Magnarelli's opening remarks, are really a good thing in having us sit down and talk to each other so we could learn what's been going on. People just kind of go through the day and it just happens. So the fact that we sat down collectively and we talked about these things, we all learned a lot more in our communities than we did before the statute was put in place. Digitization of records, a great example of things that were produced. That's a real savings. We had lots of proposals come in, again, not sort of high-end savings, but sharing materials, parts, and services amongst counties, towns, villages, cities. That came up, ways that plowing or maintenance of roadways and who was doing what, and intermunicipal agreements, which had been in place on an informal basis, were improved, fixed, modernized, updated, and then formalized. And that was a good thing on behalf of the municipalities. Oddly enough, or maybe not, but animal control came up quite a bit, and shared animal control services and code enforcement, GIS, personnel, lawyers, municipal attorney assistants came up of the county facilitating legal expertise with local governments. Lots of talk, but not an awful lot of consolidation of justice courts amongst the municipalities. It would come up, but because of statutory barriers, where maybe you had two courts that weren't contiguous to each other, two jurisdictions, but different parts of the county merging, or things like that, and fire district mergers where they weren't contiguous to each other. Those types of things were brought up. Water, wastewater, as we talked about on Long Island, electricity, aggregation of how to aggregate electricity and natural gas and try to generate savings. Not so much talk about dissolution of government and formal consolidation and elimination of government. It did come up in some areas of the state where it was suggested by the people and ratified by independent votes of the jurisdictions to do that. But I think personnel shared services, information technology were the big ones. And finally, and I believe in Orange County it'll be the case too, where we'll probably see more of land mobile radios and emergency communication systems, 911 consolidation of dispatch centers, public safety answering points. Does the city want to transfer that to the county? How can the county help the city? Or with radio dispatch and put into individual law enforcement cars was also a big one, and that came out of Broome County.
Wonderful. Again, I applaud you on this report. Fantastic stuff.
Thank you.
And, good job to all the communities out there that have been doing this now for, I know, a very long time, longer than a year. But, thank you for saving the taxpayer money. I appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, I'm done. Thanks.